Greetings everyone, I've been reviewing a lot of extremely expensive camera lenses recently. Let's swing the other way round and check out the new TTArtisans 17mm f1.4. It's a fully manual Chinese lens offering an aps-c image circle, so it'll be available on Sony E-mount, Canon EOS M, Fuji X and Micro Four Thirds mounts. The tested lens was on Sony E-mount. Here's what it looks like on a full frame camera, so pretty clearly it's intended for crop shooters there. When it comes out, it's going to cost $140 or around £130 in the UK. That is a very low price for such a very wide angle lens, the full frame equivalent of 25mm, with such a bright maximum aperture of f1.4, which lets in lots of light and gets noticeably out of focus backgrounds. I find lenses like this pretty exciting. That combination of wide angle and bright aperture is pretty sweet, although the formula is hard to design and manufacture well. I would like to thank the Pergear company for sending me a copy of this lens for testing, although as usual this is an independent review. I'll be looking at both its strengths and its weaknesses. This lens is very small with an unusual trapezoid shape, and it sports a diagram of its internal optics on the outer lens barrel. That is a first for me. As I've mentioned already, it is a totally manual lens without any electronics. It's based on a very shiny metal lens mount without any weather sealing. Most of the lens's body is taken up by the wide focus ring, which turns extremely smoothly, being nicely damped. The lens shows just a little focus breathing as you change focus, zooming in a little as you focus more closely. The aperture control ring comes at the front, and it has evenly spaced gentle clicks every half stop of aperture. The front of the lens has a very small 40.5mm filter thread, and the lens did not come with a hood. Its lens caps cruise in place, something I really hate, although you don't have to screw it in much at all, and at least that makes it a little more secure on there. Overall, its design certainly looked a little unusual, but in every other way it's a typically good quality, metallic, manual focus little Chinese lens. Now onto image quality. I'm testing it here on my little Sony a5100 with its 24 megapixel aps-c sensor. At f1.4, we see some very impressive sharpness in the middle of your images with quite good contrast, but a little purple fringing is visible here. We also see a cool color cast in this lens's image, cool as in blue, at all different apertures. The corners, however, look absolutely terrible at f1.4, as you can see here. Stop down to f2 and there's only a tiny improvement in contrast in those corners, but the middle of the image now looks absolutely perfect. At f2.8 the middle is just as good, the corner image quality is beginning to pick up a bit now. At f4 the corners look fairly good, although right in the edges we're still catching some strong colour fringing. f5.6 and f8 both look excellent in the corners now. If you stop down as far as f16, then some softness begins to emerge due to the effects of diffraction. Overall, well, considering the lens's very low price, its performance is actually quite adequate. It is always very sharp in the middle of your images with decent contrast. The corners need to be stopped down quite a lot for good performance, but they do get very sharp if you do, so the lens is clearly a good enough performer if you're careful to use it within its limitations. Alright, let's look at distortion and vignetting now. The lens projects a little barrel distortion, noticeable but not bad. Vignetting is there at f1.4, but it's not disastrous. At f2 and f2.8 those corners brighten up pretty quickly, so the lens is actually corrected reasonably well here. Now let's take a look at close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to 20cm, which is pretty useful for shooting smaller subjects. At f1.4, close-up image quality is sharp, but contrast is slightly low. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 for contrast to catch up with sharpness here. How well does this lens work against bright lights? There are quite some problems here actually, with some pretty complex flaring patterns even when those bright lights are just on the edge of your images. While we're working in the dark now, let's look at chroma levels. At f1.4, chroma smearing is very strong on bright points of light in the corners of your images. Stop down to f2 to see it reduced, although even at f2.8 and f4, we still see some bright chromatic aberration there. So if you were dreaming of using this lens for serious astrophotography, not just for fun, that's a bit of a bucket of cold water for you. If you stop down as far as f8, then you are treated to some pretty strong sun stars. Let's zoom out a little and take a look at them. They're pretty impressive there. Finally, bokeh. The quality of this lens's bokeh is just good. It's not super soft, but neither is it busy, and sometimes it can look really quite pleasant. Overall, if this lens had been more expensive, I would have had to class it as a bit of a failure, as it does have quite a few issues. Its colours are very cool, and its flaring is pretty strong, and you need to stop it down for sharp image corners. However, if you don't desperately need sharp corners in your images at bright apertures, then actually it's fairly capable of getting good pictures, and its low vignetting and distortion and reasonably nice bokeh mean that, considering its very low price, it is a nice budget option. It's quite interesting there. For the money you're paying, I can recommend it just about.